Good morning students, I am going to start your last chapter of the Vistas book, The Advanced Rise and O-Level, which is written by Collins Dexter. Mr. Collins Dexter was born on 29 September in 1930 at Stamford, England, and he took his last breath at the age of 86 on 21st March 2017 at Oxford in England. He was a novelist by profession and he was famous by his crime fiction as well as the Inspector Morale series, which runs from 1975 to 1999. Now some important characters of the story. James Evans, the prisoner, the protagonist of the story. Secretary of Examination Board, the governor of HM Prisoner, Oxford, Mr. Jackson, the prison officer, is a senior prison officer of D Wing. Mr. Stephen, the prison officer, he was newly appointed. S. McLeary was an invigilator and he was a parson from St. Mary Max. Mr. Carter, Detective Superintendent. Mr. Bell, Detective Chief Superintendent. These are the 8 important characters of the story. Now, introduction of the lesson. The story Evans Tries an O-Level is about a cunning prisoner, Evan, who makes his plan to escape from prison on the day of a German examination. O-Level examination. All the authorities of jail, on the other hand, are ready to cover up all sides sort of risk. Will he able to succeed in escape? Let's see. The story starts with a telephonic conversation between governor and the examination board secretary. The prison authority was conducted an O-Level examination in German language for prisoner named Evans. The secretary asks about the venue of the exam and also about the invigilator for it. The governor replies that the examination can be conducted in Evans' cell and a churchman will be appointed as an invigilator for the exam. They both then end their conversation by deciding on how and when the exams will be conducted. The secretary asked the prisoner's name and the governor replied that his name was James Roderick Evans. The secretary also wanted to have some clarification whether the Evans was a violent person or not. Governor said that there was no such a record and he was a nice guy, a bit humorous, and was a star at the Christmas musical conferences or performances. He compared him to a comedian Mike Yarwood because of his copying act. He also added that he was suffered from kleptomania which urged him to steal. Governor wanted to tell something more but decided that he would keep a check on that. The secretary asked governor if he could arrange a room for exam. Governor replied that there was no such problem because Evan was on his own lockup. So they could conduct the exam in there if the secretary had no problem. This is the Evans lockup. The secretary found it suitable. The governor also told him that they would call a churchman from a near church, St. Mary Max, who would keep a check on Evan during the examination. The secretary laughed and the church had a good number of priests and one could be assigned the job of supervision to the St. Mary Max church. The secretary questioned the governor that if it was easy to stop Evan from communicating the other person. Governor laughed and thanked him for accepting his request. He then put the receiver of the phone back on rest and called for Evans. Evan had escaped from prison thrice. This is the prison where Evans was there, and due to recent unrest, the highly guarded areas of the north, he would not be allowed to present at the governor's residence in Oxford, and this is the place where the Evan escaped thrice. The governor did not want to disgrace by Evans. Evan was not a burden, but his presence was uncomfortable. The governor planned to supervise him personally when he visited Oxford. It was possible that Evan was actually interested in adding up to his qualification by learning German. On 7th June, Monday at 8:30 p.m., the German teacher shook hands with Evans at the high security recreation block which was across the D-Way. He wished him luck in German language, but Evan couldn't understand. Later Evans realized it and thanked the teacher. The teacher communicated that Evan was not prepared and did not even have the slightest chance to pass the exam. Evan said it was possible that he cleared the exam and would surprise everyone. Next morning at 8:30, Evan was visited by the two men. He tucked his dirty strings waist into the dirty trouser and stood up with his bed that was attached to the wall. He greeted Mr. Jackson cheerfully and said that it was an honor for him that he visited his cell early in the morning. Jackson was surprised. Jackson was a senior prison officer of D Wing, and both Jackson and Evans was enemy. Mr. Stephen, who was a newly appointed officer and a strong-looking man, had come along with him. Mr. Jackson greeted him briefly and then asked him about his well-being and made fun of him by calling him Einstein. Evan replied in a similar way by pointing him out that Einstein was a mathematician and then said that he thought that he was a Jew. Evan had not shaven and he was wearing a dirty hat on his head. He asked Jackson to excuse him as he was going to shave when both of them entered the cell. After hearing him, Jackson told Stephen that this reminded him that Stephen should take away his razor as soon as he completed shaving his ugly-looking face. He also added that one day Evan would go a favor for the prison officer by cutting down his throat with a razor. Evan gave a thoughtful look at his strict supervisor, who had medal from the Second World War lined up on his left side of the blazer on the left pocket. He asked him, "Mr. Jackson, was it you who took away my nail cutter?" Evan was always worried about his hand's look. Jackson replied he took his nail file too. Evan got angry and his eyes started growing with anger. Jackson was ready for this and he answered that it was the governor's order. He bent towards him and asked in a whisper whether he wanted to complain. Evan denied by moving his shoulders. Jackson told Evan that he had only half an hour to get ready and also told him to remove his dirty hat. Evan moved his hand towards his dirty woolen hat and smiled sadly. He told Mr. Jackson that he wanted to take it with him as it was a lucky charm. Evan knew that Jackson was sympathetic towards him. At 8:45 a.m., McLeary, who was a member of the church, left his bachelor flat in Broad Street. This is a bachelor flat. He started walking fast towards the Carfax. The weather report claimed that temperature would be normal in early June. McLeary was wearing black coat, overcoat you can say, Our clerical had to protect himself from the rainfall and started within an hour. It had also splashed water on his spectacle. He was carrying a small brown colored suitcase in his right hand, and he had all things required for his morning duty, such as sealed question paper envelope, a yellow supervisor form, a special permission card, and verified him as a supervisor, a blunt knife to cut his seal of the paper, a Bible as he had to speak for a women's association on the book of Ruth, and the latest copy of Church Time. The 2-hour examination was planned to begin at 9:50 a.m. Evan was foaming his face strongly when Stephen brought in 2 small square tables. He put them opposite each other in the small space between the bed and the painted wall. He then brought in 2 chairs, and less worn out the chair was placed in front of the table, which was near the cell. Jackson made a small final appearance and asked Evan to behave properly. Evan turned and showed his acceptance. Jackson ordered Evans to remove the poster which had pinned up on the cell wall. Evan agreed to this and said that he was about to remove them as he knew that it was some churchman who was going to come for the exam. Jackson inquired as to how he knew that. Evans said that he had noticed it when he had signed the examination form. Evans continued with the shaving and sought of Jackson's permission to ask him something. He then asked him why the officer had put a microphone in his cell, and he turned his head towards the space above the door. Jackson admitted the microphone was not put perfectly, as Evans easily spotted. Evans questioned him why they think that he would run. Jackson replied that anyone with a sense would not trust him. Evans then questioned him as to who was going to listen to him. Jackson replied that governor would listen as he did not trust him. Jackson told him that even he didn't trust him, so he would watch him like a hawk, a bird that keeps its eye on its prey. He finally asked him to keep his nose clean, and Evan agreed. He knew that this already, and so he kept a neat hanky on the bed. Evan wished him good luck before leaving. The priest McCleary signed his name in the visitor book. Here the McCleary signing his name in the visitor book at the gate of the house, and then followed the prison officer through the exercise yard or the D-wing. There he was greeted by Jackson. The heavy outer door of the D-wing was opened and then shut behind him. The same happened when they entered through the inner door. McCleary joined Stephen. Jackson ordered Stephen to remove the razor from the cell. Stephen agreed. He also told him to keep close watch. McCleary made a vibrating sound while climbing the stairs. This is an iron stair. Following his new guide. When they reached the entrance of the cell, Stephen opened the peephole and informed McCleary that he was a person who had to take the exam. Evan was sitting quietly, facing the door, slight away from the 2 tables. He was concentrating on an elementary German grammar. Stephen took one of the key from the ring and opened the lock. The cell made a ring round after it sprung up. At 9:10 a.m., the governor switched the receiver off the microphone. He ordered Jackson to tell Evans to be careful as they had installed a microphone in his cell. He thought that it would be a good for warn him. He said it is a way as though the Evan was never able to spot it. A thought came to the governor's mind that all this seems like a theatrical drama and all the preparations were like those done by schoolboys. He thought that how could Evan think of escaping that day? He could have tried it when he was at the recreation block because it was easier to escape from there. But today he was locked up in the cell. All the prison officers were closely watching him, and there were 2 doors between the cell and the yard. There were walls as high as piles in the green grass. Yes, Evan was totally safe now. The governor thought that there will be no problem if he keeps the receiver switched on. Although he knew that there was nothing to listen because it is a duty of supervisor to maintain silence. But he was still in a doubt. He was worried about Evans taking undue advantage of McLeary. He could have smuggled him to take long blade handle tool, this is here in the picture, or a rope ladder. The governor at once got alert. He thought that they had taken away all the possible weapon from Evans, but there chance that McLeary would brought some weapon knowingly with him, and such as the jackknife, which is large knife with a folding blade. Even Evans could hold him captive for forcing the prison officer to release him. The governor called up someone at 11:12 a.m. Stephen had already introduced the supervisor and Evan, who had to appear for exam. Just as the moment Jackson came and asked McLeary to come out for a minute. He explained about the governor's reason for being worried. McLeary cooperated him and in the checking process by holding out his arm so that he could be checked. Jackson started checking him very fast. He then found something hard, which McLeary said his reading glasses. To be sure, he even checked his suitcase. He checked each envelope carefully, searched everything with his palms. He also went through the holy writs and the church time. Everything was fine, but there was one thing in the suitcase that was strongly confusing him. Jackson asked McLeary as to why he had brought a half-filled rubber ring. A rubber ring which was not even fit for the small child with 11 inches waist. He asked him whether he was going for swimming. McLeary, who still now seemed very friendly, suddenly changed because of his tasteless joke he made. So he told him that he suffers from hypodosis, his piles, and when he has to sit for a long time, he left his sentence incomplete. Jackson felt very awkward, but felt sorry for asking him all that. He then later on discovered the paper knife in the suitcase and said that he hoped McCleary did not mind if he kept it with him. It was 9:18 a.m. when Governor heard the voice again, and it was stood that the examination will start little late. McCleary called Evans about having a watch. He answered yes. He said that he will tell him when to start, and he will again tell him when only 5 minutes be left. Evans said nothing. McCleary gave him instructions about where to write the index number, center number, and he quietly followed it. When McCleary was about to say start, Evans interrupted him and looked at Stephens. Stephen answered that he has been ordered by Mr. Jackson to stay there for the exam. Evans complained for not being able to concentrate if someone will be constantly be watching him like this. He also felt sorry for this. Governor asked Jackson and ordered him to get Evans out of the cell, as he thought they were doing a bit too much. So children, that's all in this class. Rest part of the story will be continued in next video lesson. Till then, read this chapter thoroughly, and it's very interesting one. And if you take a thorough reading, you will understand. Thank you.